likely will, assuming things go well, probably stay at Millbrae for a little while and try to develop that. So, see how it works out. Stable, whatever. The economy's so crazy these days.
Bring in the
Everybody
biggest applicants
try
from Wilson.
put all the chips in the .com basket. I think they're
Both air taxis, which are gonna be coming live on
I have one son
2025.
that works in
And,
.com and one that works for Santa Clara.
I have 3 hearings. Hi, man.
I have met you once, but
Okay,
Rob.
congratulations.
Thank you.
Got
lots of
good financial
new
package,
faces.
but
Yesterday, the UC Davis was about studies very helpful.
the older way.
And this is my city, I'm looking at Foster.
Slow and steady. Slow and steady, but yeah.
Even
You're really good at
don't
managing.
so much about airport roundtables.
Oh,
Those are gonna go like this. I'm really worried
like
about school in Santa Bruno.
big compensation up front, but there's no certainty. Right, you take that money, you invest it.
And it's their lowest income. So I think if we could put our heads together, we can
I was gonna ask Ryan, because when we were testing.
more informed request on that.
Sure.
Especially with the FAA reauthorizing this year. So I'd just like to get us together and open, honest.
Oh, yeah.
You might say something that's wrong, but not feel like it's.
Okey dokey.
So look for an invitation coming from that mayor of Millbrae.
Well, so knowledgeable.
No, I've just been around, now I feel like an old timer. I just feel like I was elected
Supervisor?
a little while ago, so
Supervisor,
it just happened.
it's now 5:30.
Yeah. What's that?
It's now 5:30.
Huh?
It is now 5:30.
Yeah, so like when there's a
Right.
course of solar.
Can I bang the gavel?
Yes.
Kind of a gavel is. Okay, everybody, Davina. Yes. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's what it's all time.
I have a big clock on the wall somewhere. It is 5:30, and we'll call this meeting the Emergency Services Council for May 4th. It's actually 2023, not 3023. But we're all here, and I call on the clerk to call the roll call, please.
Okay. Atherton? Belmont?
First present.
Brisbane? Burlingame? Colma? Daly City? East Palo Alto? Foster City?
Here.
Half Moon Bay?
Here.
Hillsborough? Menlo Park? Taylor, present. Millbrae?
Ann Schneider, present.
Pacifica? Portola Valley?
Craig Taylor, present.
Redwood City? Kaya Aiken, present. San Bruno?
Michael Salazar here.
San Carlos? San Mateo?
Rob Newsom, here.
South San Francisco? Woodside?
Paul Gold, here.
And County of San Mateo?
Welcome, here. So I understand there are a couple of audio visual announcements that we're going to start with, but let me just say this first, that the microphones are in the ceiling and they're very, very sensitive. So if Redwood City and Menlo Park are wanting to have a private conversation, maybe go outside because these microphones will pick everything up, okay? Not that you would want to have a private conversation, but go ahead, you audio-visual folks back in the back, or...
Yeah, so, this room is not equipped with a camera, so each camera has a laptop on its desk. That will be what is filming you. We have the mics in the ceiling. Anyone who's viewing from the outside will pick up the audio. When they make public comment and are allowed in, all the audio will come in through the speakers and we'll be able to hear them. When you are speaking, please announce your city. We're going to spotlight that speaker, so we'll need just a little bit of time to get that going on Zoom. So whoever you are, announce your city and then give us just a brief minute to spotlight that so we'll be able to see you.
Okay. Madam Clerk, do we have a quorum?
We have 11 present and a 20-member board, so we do have a quorum.
That's close. Okay. Well, it's nice to be in this very modern, outstanding facility. Thank you, Don, for hosting us here. First time I've ever had my own personal computer at a meeting like this. I appreciate it. Thank you, despite the fact that we can't fiddle with it and check Twitter and all that. Let's move on, Madam Clerk, to public comment, correspondence, and announcements.
Public comment is now open. If your hand is raised in Zoom, you'll be called for this item in person, after in-person comments. If joining by phone, please press *9 to raise your hand. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, Madam Chair, Half Moon Bay wishes to make an announcement. It is that on May the 18th, from 5:30 to 7:30, at the San Mateo Credit Union, there will be a fundraiser for the Coastside Victims Fund. 100% of the money raised will go directly to the victims and families of the farm workers affected in our Half Moon Bay January 23rd shooting. So anybody that can come will help to boost that fund. Thank you.
Thank you. Any additional public comments? Any on Zoom?
All good?
All good.
Okay. We'll move to item number 3, which is an action to set the agenda and approve the consent agenda item. I guess we need a motion.
So moved. Second.
Moved and seconded, and without objection, we'll just approve it. Is that okay, Mr. Lawyer?
That works.
Okay. Anybody object to that? Okay, very good. We'll move on to item 4, presentations. There are no awards or guest speakers, I take it. So we'll move to the regular agenda. And the first one there is item 5, approve agenda format modifications and finance committee changes. Mr. Matei.
Yes, thank you, Chair Slocum, members of the Service Council. We've just redesigned the format, as you can see from the agenda already. We're also adjusting how we're going to conduct the meeting a little bit. We're going to go on the format of kind of the Board of Supervisors and what typical city councils do. So it should be nothing new for you folks, but it was primarily done for 2 reasons. One, I think it's run smoother and it allows the community to participate in more of a good fashion, I should say. After that, this is a dual kind of a meeting in the format. We are going to separate the Finance Committee and the Administration Committee. There was some discussion about this, and we came up with some ideas, and one of those is to actually have the administration be taken over by the Agenda Committee, which would be composed of the Vice Chair and the Chair, myself, Adam Ely from the County Executive's Office, and the Deputy Director would be attending those meetings and bringing agenda items forward. You can always send agenda items to myself, and I can take them forward for you, or you can mention them to Supervisor Slocum. The other part of this on the agenda side is how we function and how we're going to vote on the actual item, and that is, we'll do the presentation. I'm just reading them so you understand. Questions from the council members, public comment, discussion, and then the motion. It's pretty simple, but we need to formalize that. We tried doing some stuff with agendas before this, but it really needed some work, and we were happy to do that work. So if there's no other questions, which I'm happy to answer, we do have to vote on this because this was voted in a while ago, this combination of Finance Committee and Administration. So we have to do something formally to make a separation of it.
So we'll open it up for questions from members. Anybody have a question? Yeah, Ann Snyder.
Do I need to announce me? Just Millbrae? I'm sorry, it was a little bit harder to hear.
Okay?
So separating out finance and admin
Mhm.
and standardizing the membership of the two.
Mm-hmm.
So my only concern, given that we're a long county with a coast-side, hillside, of representation from both north, south, central, and coast-side, this side, how would that be handled in these committees?
The two committees would be appointed, or the Finance Commission is appointed, actually, is voted on. And the Admin Committee is the vice chair and chair. So you can contact any one of those or myself to add something to the agenda, if you wish. And we'll do an agenda setting like they do at most cities with the mayor and vice mayor
Who's unmuted? Do we know?
That's the room.
All right. A fire battalion chief contract, which is actually one of the items that is on here today. You'll hear a little bit about that. There's a position of fire battalion chief, which is housed in the Department of Emergency Management and functions in emergencies. And then the remainder are small portions devoted to management and admin support, warehouse lease, the county, on behalf of the operational area, a warehouse that has emergency response supplies, so the JPA pays a portion of that, service supplies, and then the cost of doing business as an enterprise here in the Rock for Department of Emergency Management. That's the bulk of the budget. The next page shows the hazmat response. Environmental health, hazardous material emergency response program. This is a contract primarily with San Mateo County Consolidated. That is also an item that's on the agenda, so there'll be a little bit more background on that item if you're not familiar. But the county as a whole works on hazardous material responses together. Each city obviously doesn't necessarily have its own hazmat response team. It's a consolidated effort. Personnel costs related to the hazardous material response and service supplies is the other portion of that. And then the bottom box in blue shows the county alerting and technology system so that the county can send out countywide texts alerting folks to happenings. And the various cities and the county take good advantage of pushing out those alerts regularly. As you can see on the next slide, there is a reduction this year in the cost in the expenses that the JPA has incurred. This will result in a reduction in the overall cost to the cities of participating in the JPA. I can talk on the next slide what that's about. You can see the 29% reduction in DEM emergency services, which is good news. There's a 9% increase in the Environmental Health Division hazmat contract, and that's related to the cost of services increasing, which is just consistent with, increase for service provision. Next slide, please. And if you need more information on why the overall contribution is less, the good news, there's just a description of how that came about. There's a reduction in costs from the Emergency Services Department to the Department of Emergency Management, and a hefty sum of $424,000, and lesser reduction in costs for maintenance of motor vehicles in the amount of $88,000. Following slide, which is in the materials that you were provided, shows a little breakdown on the total program costs for each city and the percent of total costs that each city pays. We'll return in June with a budget proposal that should look suspiciously similar to this, and request your approval of that. One thing that is not outlined in here is that we do have still a fairly hefty reserve for the unit, for the JPA. It's in the range of, I believe, $1.4 million. At some point, most likely in the next budgetary cycle, we'll have to identify whether we roll those reserve funds into the cost of provision of services to reduce costs, or whether or not there are one-time expenditures that the council has agreed on using those funds for. With that, I will pause and open it up for questions, which I will answer to the best of my ability.
Good job, thank you. Question? Yes. Yes.
So I saw there was a $410,000 in reserves that was going back to all the cities. And how is that different than the $1.4 million that's also excess?
So in conversation with the county CFO and the fiscal officer for this JPA, It appears that the JPA receives a certain amount of money each year from SFO. Those funds are about $400,000 annually, and historically have been placed in the reserves. It's the opinion of the county CFO that those should, because they're ongoing source of revenue for the JPA, they should be just considered revenue and rolled into the revenue that JPA will have annually. And so that's partly why you're going to see a reduction in the overall cost to cities, is that's not being separated into a reserves fund, it's being used to cover the costs of services currently, if that answers the question.
And then there's a cap of 500,000 on the reserve fund, right? So we can't have more than 500,000 in the reserve fund.
Yep. These are exact questions that I was reviewing before we had this. So that's why I'm saying that JPA needs to take a look at, we have this extra amount in reserves above what our projected cap is. And I think for June, one of the questions is going to be, we want to raise the cap, I'm just to $1 million or something, and roll the 400,000 back into the cost of business. Do we want to do that this year? Do we want to do that next year? So that's an item that needs to go through the finance committee and ultimately this committee to see how we're going to address that excess over the cap.
So I just have another question and another comment. And so I'm thinking, this is my comment, that, well, the question would be first, before my comment, the question would be, so this year we had a lot of emergencies, the flooding, the trees falling and all that kind of stuff. And so it's kind of cool that we still have a lot of money in the budget that we haven't spent. So that's good news. So I'm thinking that maybe we would take this $1.4 million and give it back to all the cities. It's just a thought.
Yeah, I think that's something that should be discussed through the finance committee and then through the board as a whole. What's the recommendation to use those funds? I think that there are possibly some one-time initiatives that folks should be thinking about, including the Department of Emergency Management, items that will prepare them to deal with these storms and disasters that seem to be recurring at an increased rate.
We do have money that you granted us, $375,000 for the all-hazard evacuation plan for the county of San Mateo. So it's a base plan for every city, base plan for the whole county. We don't have that structure in place yet. Everybody's kind of got their, little spots here, little spots there. So we're bringing somebody in to look at that, a contractor to look at that and come up with an overall plan. And it involves, for instance, we've talked about it a lot here, but it involves identifying, areas like, say, San Bruno Avenue or Hillsdale as evacuation areas, or Edgewood Road. What is the possibility? How many people can you get out there and doing these studies on that? So that was funded by this group right here. So you do some stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think Milbrae had a question.
She's a good woman from Redwood City. I'm usually the one saying I'd rather keep more money in the bank just in case. My comment's going to sound a little bit confusing here. And I think one of it is, if you looked at all of our regional committees and commissions that work on various aspects of emergency management, my research is showing that we don't have the monitors for a range of items. The second to the last one shoreline meeting said that right now the way we know if a community is flooding is there are cameras pointed at creeks, and if the creeks go over a certain level, and you're part of the old historical flood commission, you will get a phone call saying, hey, you might want to tell your people a flood is coming. Millbrae's not one of those. I'm sure a number of our cities are not. Ms. Hurt will know that when the skies turned orange and the year before, when we couldn't see across the street in Millbrae, we brought in county health, and county health said, well, we didn't think the air was that bad, but it wasn't that bad down here. But up in North County, where the fire smoke was catching between San Bruno Mountain and the Santa Cruz Mountains, we literally could not see across the street. Long story short, the need for more monitors. So as a budget item, something for us to consider would be looking at the range of disaster-related issues, and do we have the monitoring device? For my city, for San Bruno, for Burlingame, we get our rainfall numbers from SFO. But if you know how rain falls closer to a mountain than it does on the flat. So we are, as a city, looking at, and we now have our own lobbyist in Sacramento to look for funds for a range of new monitoring devices across environmental conditions on that. And I think it would behoove the county to dive into, do we have the right monitors in the right places that can give us advance warning for floods or for, I guess right now all of us are thinking rains, but I just came back from a symposium at Davis talking about the sheer amount of air pollution our region is getting on that, and we have absolutely no monitors. California Air Resources Board doesn't handle airports. The US EPA handles airports. I was in Washington, D.C. 4 weeks ago and met directly with that department in the EPA and with President Biden's environmental justice community, because I do not think that we're being represented. We're considered upper middle class out here, everything taken care of, and we're not a squeaky wheel. And that has not been helping my community. So I just would like the Finance Committee to consider what it might be to have some additional monitors, maybe reach out to One Shoreline. They had a little bit of money left in some contract, so they could do a little bit more. But is it enough? Is it going to cover coastside? Is it going to cover any of the places that flooded in the atmospheric rivers this year? Is it handling air quality on that? And it may take more than a year to even find out what it is we should have on that, but I think that that's a missing piece. And that's also the reason why I'd rather keep a little bit more, rather than like the governor giving us back a couple dollars that we spend. If we kept it there, we've got it in the event of an emergency, and I'm more of that field.
Thank you. Thank you. Belmont.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of lines of thinking. I'll start with the hazmat group. I want to thank Chief Thrasher and his team for finding savings and executing grants to support some of the work. I'm thinking a little bit about how our cities are growing, and one particular sector is the bio sector, and thinking about hazmat and preparation for that. It would be interesting to hear from the leadership, you know, how they're thinking about the future and setting money aside. I know it's, as someone said, low frequency but high risk work, and the biosector is definitely growing. There are more labs. How are we preparing for that?
Did you want Adam to answer that, or
What do you want to?
Well, I see Chief Thrasher, so he could definitely say a few things, and anybody else who'd like to weigh in on that is I'm happy with.
Certainly. Board, appreciate the opportunity to come and speak with you today. Kent Thrasher, I'm the fire chief at the San Mateo Consolidated Fire Department. We hold the contract with the county to provide hazardous materials emergency response. We work in conjunction with the county's environmental health and some other partner agencies, including all of your fire departments, when we respond to hazardous materials incidents. So Councilmember Hurt is talking about labs and bio type of buildings that are being built in a large amount across our entire county. So I think for us, it's one of our challenges over the next few years is addressing how we respond to those types of calls, specifically those that are in high rises. So what we're seeing now are a lot of bio and research facilities that include laboratories that are on very high level floors. So typical responses for hazardous materials to this point has been at a ground level. We don't respond to hazmat calls on very frequently at these high level calls. It changes the dynamic of it. Running a hazmat call on a 10th floor of a building as opposed to on a ground floor, a very different environment. So we're looking at items and ways to take care of those things, including different training modules, different types of equipment. You know, all of that will have a cost. So I believe one way to handle that from a financial perspective will be, you know, considering options when these huge proposals come across the different cities' comm dev desks to authorize these proposals for these large developments. There may be some impacts that may need support, the training and the facilities and the equipment that we need to respond to those types of calls. Many of them have very vibrant and very capable response teams of their own. You know, the Gileads of the world and the Genentechs and the Roush, those types of outfits have very robust response teams to handle most of their needs internally. But at those smaller, the mom and pops and the other spec type buildings we're seeing challenges coming with those types of things, and we want to be in front of those. So there are many options, I think, for handling those. One may be on the individual cities and how you handle impacts and impact fees and those types of things.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful, and I just wanted to put it out there because I think it's an important aspect of the work that we're doing and that we should be thinking about, especially as individual cities, so that we can prepare for a future and be ready. So thank you
Certainly.
for those pieces. The other thing that I wanted to follow on is a little bit of Redwood City's comments with regards to the reserve, and I think it would be interesting to find out kind of what are best practices for like agencies like ourselves when it comes to reserves, because while 1.4 million sounds like a lot in an emergency, not really. And so I would really like to see maybe what other like agencies in California are doing and how much they are keeping, setting aside, just as emergency management best practices.
Great. We'll look into that and report back between now and the next meeting.
That would be great, thanks. And then I guess the last thing that's on my mind, and I appreciate Melbray for bringing up air monitors and a lot of monitoring that is actually already happening, and they're coming up with more low-cost sensors and air monitors. I think it's important, but I also think we need to collaborate with the monitors so that we're not just buying and not having like an appropriate overview. And I will tell you the Air District is doing that. Is it at the speed that everybody wants? Maybe not necessarily, but it is happening and it is occurring, and there are definitely sensors in places that are sensitive, and especially for underserved communities. But we can always be better, and we should think about that. I don't know if I want to use reserves for that, and I'm happy to have a conversation, as I've said with you before, offline about how we can represent better in San Mateo County. But by way of sensors, we also have to be careful because there's a lot of the private industry that also has a lot of sensors out, and so there is this thing of having too much wrong information and like what's the right source. So maybe we can be a part of that discussion in the future. Thank you.
I appreciate that, and I will take you up on that. Brings me to another question for hazmat. We are getting, it's been going for years. Again, and several of us now are on SFO roundtable, and this is outside of our bailiwick. But as the airport comes back from COVID, as it built more terminals, right, basically hundreds of yards from my neighborhoods, San Bruno's neighborhoods, we are smelling more chemical leaks. And I have written to the airport and have gotten zero response. We'll be taking a more formal action on that. Where it's coming from, is it a spill on the tarmac? I'm assuming that that is not a San Mateo County issue because it's them, but they're in San Mateo County. How do we handle that?
It is a challenge, to say the least. So because it's in our area and can directly affect our jurisdictions outside of the airport property, we do respond as requested to the airport for hazardous materials responses. As far as the chemicals that they keep on site, the amounts of chemicals, the types of chemicals, and how they're permitted and regulated, that's out of our purview. Our county environmental health, that group, would be involved with that if it was part of San Mateo County. I believe it falls more under San Francisco and how they handle it. We do, and I'm going to reach back and look at my battalion chief over hazmat, Jeff Thorne. I believe that our county does the inspections for the airport.
That is correct. San Mateo County does the inspections of the hazardous material storage at the airport, but it's the city of San Francisco, county of San Francisco that regulates what they can have and what they can't have at the airport.
Right, so there is.
So it's like a partnership.
There is a cross there. So we do have some pull, I guess is what I would say, through our county Office of Environmental Health.
Well, maybe we can talk about that. My concern is not some of the hazmat materials in storage, it's refueling the jets.
Sure.
And that's what I think it is. And depending on who and what time of day, but I'm getting more and more accounts. I smell it.
Yeah.
And, you know, just having come back from the symposium, I now know what the chemicals are, but now I have to take it to the next level. But if we could talk, that would be great.
I think we can reach out and work with environmental health on coming up with
Excellent.
something on that.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, one more question for Hazmat. Sorry.
Certainly.
The recent storms brought me back to the place where I began to worry more about the landfill that we have in Half Moon Bay. That is a county landfill. And I'm sure there are other landfills around the county besides ours. So I'm wondering if we are looking at that as something that we need to get onto, because the storms aren't going to stop. They're going to get worse. And the more we have, the worse they get, the more hazardous materials flow into our dear ocean, our creeks.
Right. And again, it's an air, water quality type of a concern for us. And the part of the hazardous materials world that we regulate, we're the response for emergency responses. So if there's an emergency response, there's a chemical in a container that shows up at the landfill, we would respond to take care of that. As far as the water control or the water quality or the air quality, way out of our purview. Again, I don't want to keep pushing on the Wayman Wong and his group in environmental health, but I think environmental health might be able to help us out with that in addressing those issues.
Okay.
We are strictly here to respond to hazardous materials emergencies, not so much the air quality and the water quality type of issues.
Right. But is there a countywide monitoring agency? Is it the EPA that does it?
The EPA would be a big part of that, right? It's from several groups. It would be air and water quality groups, our Office of Environmental Health, the EPA. There will be several fractions that fall into that.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Adam, I have a question for you.
Sure.
And a comment. The question is, like, getting back to the idea of monitors and that discussion, what's the process that we use to further that conversation and get the data and the costs and all the ins and outs of it? How do you take care of that? Does Don take care of it? Or what's the process?
I think the process on identifying, it's sort of all back to the budget and the reserves, right? The process on identifying items that you might want to use the reserves for would come through those communications in agenda setting. If somebody wants to learn something more about monitors, they would ask, could we have a board item, a mission item on monitors? And, you know, if that made the agenda, DEM could look into it and host the conversation with the full group. Does that answer the question?
Maybe.
Well, you honestly, with weights, in the JPA, you can hire a contractor if you want to study something, vote on the money if you want to do that, or you can give it to us. We manage that like we did with all hazards evacuation plan. We brought it to you, you voted on it, and then we are going after the contractor to get the reports back to you. So we can do it that way, however you want to do it, but I agree it needs to be an agenda item and then voted on.
Yeah, I just don't want to lose track of that.
Yeah.
conversation,
And
that issue.
I think it would be incumbent on DEM as these issues come up at these meetings to not let them just fall to the wayside, to surface them appropriately through the agenda setting process, and so we don't lose track of them.
So the other point I would make is, I think it came from Vice Mayor Taylor, actually, and it was on the topic of the bio labs that are springing up, and who inspects those, and what's the regularity, and so forth and so on. And we talked about that a little bit earlier, and I know that I've had a couple of conversations now as a result of the question with environmental health regarding biolabs and inspections and all that topic. But there again, how do we not lose track of that subject? Does it get brought back?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think we could just say that this has been brought up by multiple council members. It's of interest to the greater group, so it's something that we would agendize as a for a future meeting and try to get a presentation from the appropriate environmental health staff, the appropriate participants.
And would we vote on that here today, or is that?
You wouldn't need to vote on that today, no.
Put it on the agenda.
We can just put it on the agenda, and when we're coming up with the final agenda, if it makes it through, you guys, if you're interested in it, and the chair, then we would bring it back for presentation.
Well, I'm tracking two issues. One is the monitors and one is the biolab business. So can we put that on?
Sure.
Mhm.
The last question I have, and I think we're still on the budget, right?
Yes.
Okay. Is at the finance committee meeting that we had, we talked about the possibility of some seasonal help for DEM. And as I remember it, with respect, of course, you were assigned the wonderful assignment to go in and talk to Callaghy about some money for extra help on a temporary basis to help DEM with its. But Don doesn't know about this?
No, Don is very happy as
That's
everything
right.
that you're saying.
That's right, very, very happy.
So I'm wondering, does this budget reflect those extra help people, or is that coming in June, or did it go nowhere?
This particular budget, I don't believe, reflects the addition of any extra help. The county's budget revisions for September will reflect the addition of two additional coordinators for the Department of Emergency Management, and there's a discussion about additional possible positions that is unresolved. But it's the county's desire, it's my desire, and County Executive Callaghy's desire that we develop the Department of Emergency Management and this group to be the best in the state, because we see how frequent these incidents are becoming. And so we want to be well-positioned with all the great staff from DEM to be able to meet the challenge as it continues to come.
How do we not lose track of that item?
No, that's a long-term item that the county executive's office, through, I'm sure, continued conversations with you, Supervisor Slocum, and other supervisors may have expressed similar sentiments. There's a lot of momentum to trying to really, I'd say, meet the challenge that we know are continuing to come in terms of earthquakes and storms and whatnot. So we have a lot of momentum internally to do that.
I don't want to dominate the conversation. It's my last comment on this, but when you say, use the term long-term, it bothers me because I'm thinking like a few years. And when we were talking about it, I was thinking a couple of months. So maybe we can talk offline about all that.
Yeah, no, the steps and the staff are September positions coming, and the others are continuing in a reasonably short period of time with some urgency to identify what steps we should take to.
Okay, thank you for all the answers. Shall we turn it to?
Yep.
Thank you, Worcester City. Just a really quick comment on the monitors, and it sounded as though maybe there are some private companies that have monitors out there, and I don't know how good they are, but law enforcement has tapped into Ring cameras and other neighborhood type cameras before. I wonder if there's a way, if they could be certified in some way, that we wouldn't have to buy these monitors. We partner with those agencies or businesses. They're required to have them there anyway, instead of putting duplicate monitors out there, just a thought. Clearly not my area of expertise. I wanted to touch on a couple of things specifically related to the budget and the presentation. I wanted to thank you for the information in the staff report that clarifies kind of what do we talk about, what do we cover, the business operations and what our cities get out of DEM. I appreciate that. It got buried in the middle of a slide, unfortunately, but the savings of $424,000 is no minor undertaking. I got a little bit of information before the meeting as to what that was, but I want to thank Don for pushing that for us. That's a significant part of our budget, and get that savings as well as others is very much appreciated. The PowerPoint, we talked about at our finance meeting about giving simple but more information about what we're doing. And these pictures, these slides are perfect. I mean, they lay it out very easily into areas that we can understand. It's simple to look at. My hat's off to you on the presentation. Very well received, not to mention the packet you provided for the agenda.
It's Rose.
Thank you, Rose.
Thank you. It's Rose, and it's our unheard Michael Leach, County Fiscal person, together the presentation. So thank you for saying that.
Was there another question over
Yeah, I have a question. Sorry, I'm San Mateo, and I'm new, but I was curious how the total program percentage was calculated, because being from San Mateo, we are generally either the largest or second largest city, and I see that we contribute 13.5%, and then I see Daly City, for example, who's pretty close to population, is 10.4, but Redwood City is around 81,000 people, and they have a bigger contribution than Daly City. So I was just trying to understand if there was how does it determine what the share is per city?
There's a formula they use, a cost sharing formula, and it has to do with, it's in here, it's the population percentage, it has to do with cost, value. It's very complicated. I'm not an accountant, but I can tell you that's what they use. And if we have to have, if we want to do a little, kind of a teaching seminar on it, we can give that to you.
Sure.
But we can make that happen when Mr. Leach will do that for us.
That'd be great.
But it is a comment. It's like page 5. It's on there and about it, and all these other different valued assets. Okay.
Assessed valuation tends to change that when you're looking at
Exactly.
similarly populated.
That's what changes.
Other questions? To the chair? To you, Sam Bruno, for the record. So when I was reading the report, I also had questions about the reserve amount, and it did seem low to me as well. So I'm glad to see that the other members had a similar concern around that. Being that it was established in 2017, I believe, it would be good to know that what was the philosophy behind it at the time. What was it that was anticipated? Is it really just to cover a variance in the operating budget, or should it also include some sort of capital expenditure that could happen periodically? I know the budget does have a line item for vehicle repair and replacement. It's very small. I don't know that it would cover, and actually I'm not really sure what the JPA, what assets it owns and which assets belong to the participating agencies. So there may not be a lot of capital expenses, but definitely heard some conversations here that indicate that we may have capital expenses at some point, and perhaps we would consider establishing separate reserve accounts specifically for those things, separate from what we do for cover operating variances. Also, regarding the savings that were projected in this current budget, I'm wondering what was behind the elimination of the radio cost? Because if that was a significant portion and now that's gone, does that mean the county is just going to pick that up and it's no longer going to be charged back? And
Correct.
Is that anticipated to be a permanent thing, or is it a one-time saving because of
Those costs are going to reside with the sheriff's office.
Because the rate, what we were paying for are the 3 TAC channels in the county. It's TAC 1, TAC 2, TAC 3. It's police stuff. And it was being charged to us, and it's really like, well, why is it still here? I could see why it was here if it was the sheriff. We're no longer with the sheriff, so.
Okay. Yeah, that was the one thing there, okay. And I heard an airport contribution being discussed. I know for like Measure K, the airport pays into Measure K on certain sales taxes, but those funds are earmarked and they can only be spent on airport-related activities. I'm wondering if any contribution that the airport pays into this JPA, are those funds
in any way encumbered for particular functions, or are they just part of the general fund?
I'm not aware of the similar type of restrictions. We could see if Michael Leach is able to participate. He may have better information, but I have not heard talk of those having to be segregated and used only for, that slice of response activities.
I can address that if people can hear me. So the contract does not stipulate any specific use of those funds other than the general operating support of the ESC JPA.
Perfect. And the last comment regarding air sensors, I think that's a great conversation. When I was working at ISD here, John Walton, the CIO at the time, tried to initiate a program where we would put air sensors out in the community and collect the data. And there are very low-cost solutions that are out there. The one thing I would caution against trying to aggregate data that's readily available is that not all equipment is equal, and the types of readings and the sensitivity of those devices could vary. So if you try to aggregate that data, it may not make any sense. In having this JPA lead that effort, I just wonder if the level of that there needs to be some sort of understanding of the subject matter in order to coordinate that. And I don't know that emergency services would be the best group of people to lead that sort of effort. So definitely I would support the county taking a central role in that. I think the cities individually probably wouldn't have the resources to do it well. And so a centralized effort would be the right approach. I just don't know that having it managed through emergency services would be necessarily the best approach.
Good point.
Thank you, Point.
Through the chair, not to beat a dead horse, I think that's an excellent point. It makes me nervous for my little city to try to figure out what to go and get. But back to the SFO, I didn't realize, this is my 8th year on here, and I did not know SFO paid into Measure K. But your city has reached out to me with my SFO hat about Bel Air School, which falls outside the 65 decibels, but is clearly in the path of air pollution. It's clearly in the noise path too. And if there were designated SFO funds, maybe that could be used to put in the best. This is what the study just came out of Washington. Schools are very susceptible to low, ultra-fine particles. They get through the HEPA systems. It is affecting children and at their most vulnerable age groups. So maybe there's something there, just kind of outside our bailiwick here. But let's talk some more on that, because all I thought about at Davis was Bel Air School, that's the perfect example of a community of concern, falls outside current required areas, and it probably needs some help.
Thank you. Don, did you want to add anything?
No, we've done, like, for instance, we have rain gauges in the county, and so we've reached out, like, to One Shoreline, they have them too. We're able to look at those things.
Yeah. No, I just saw you looking at that document.
Oh, no, we got something else we got to deal with.
Okay, maybe we should turn now to public comment.
Also public comment? Seeing none?
No public comment on the budget.
None on Zoom? None on Zoom.
Okay. So that was an informational item, and I don't believe we need a motion and a vote on that. So we'll move to item 7, which is to approve an agreement for hazmat services with San Mateo Consolidated Fire.
Welcome back again. Thanks for having me. So I've been working with Don and members of your team to come up with a contract that works for all of us. I've met with the Finance Committee a couple of times, given them a pretty detailed briefing on what we do, what we're all about. And I think based on all that, their recommendation is that we move forward with this. But what we're recommending right now is a 3-year contract, which is the typical contract we've had the last several cycles. We, as the San Mateo Consolidated Fire Department, again, we provide hazardous materials response to the entire county. You know, from the ocean to the bay and from San Francisco to Santa Clara. We are a OES-typed hazmat response team. We're a Type 2 team, which puts us into the state system. We have an extensive level of training for all of our members. We currently have, I believe, around 33 hazardous materials specialists within our organization that staff every day, 24/7. We are capable of responding to anywhere in the county with a hazardous materials response with up 5 or 6 of our folks, and we work in coordination with your local fire department to mitigate whatever hazardous materials emergencies we have. We've been doing this officially since, I think, 1984, and we've continued to do it year in and year out. Several years ago, I think in the late 90s, the cost of doing this became such that the city of Belmont and San Carlos at the time, the South County Fire Department, worked with the county to come up with some funding mechanism to help us offset those costs. We pay our responders an incentive on top of their regular salary due to the specialty of this type of work. And then we have some equipment and maintenance and administrative costs that go in on top of that. So at the end of the day, what we're asking for in this contract is 3 years at 5%, 4.5%, and a 4% increase year over year. That, for us, covers the costs of our payroll increases over those years, along with some inflationary costs and just the cost of maintenance. When we started the conversation, you know, Don and I started, we were asking for a 5% per year, and then CPI and things like that started changing, and we started talking about maybe a CPI-adjusted type of an agreement to keep everybody happy. We looked at the nightmare of trying to figure that out on an annual basis and calculate that and get payments and all that stuff going. And during that interim, Chief Thorne and his group were able to receive grant funding from a grant they had applied for a few years ago. It is going to offset some of our equipment costs that we were anticipating over the next couple of years. So we were able to reduce that request of 5% a year down to a 5, a 4.5, and a 4. So about a 1.5% decrease in what we were originally asking. Again, we don't make any money on this. This is something we do. The city of Belmont had a horrendous hazardous materials call in the 70s that debilitated and killed several firefighters and first responders. This is before hazmat was called hazmat, before there was any official training, before there was any federal or state recognition. Because of that, the Belmont folks back at the time became kind of up to speed and became the county experts on hazmat, so the local departments would call them when they had a hazmat call. And it kind of morphed into what it is today. The South County Fire Department, which was then Belmont and San Carlos, took it on. And then when they dissolved and Belmont kept the team, and then Belmont became part of San Mateo Consolidated, and that's how it made up with us now. So that's the presentation that you have given to the Finance Committee a couple of times, and John's written up in the staff report, I believe, and that's the proposal you have in front of you. So I'm glad to take any questions on that. I think the last thing I would add, though, is every 3 years when this cycle comes up, I go to the county fire chiefs and I ask them, anybody else interested in taking hazmat? Just to make sure there's no conflicts, and they're all very happy to let us keep it. So that's where we're at.
Questions from the council? Yep.
So, I'm sure it's probably the most efficient, cost-effective way to do this, but would there be benefits just to response time if the service were decentralized? And I'm thinking, you know, particularly for the coast side.
Sure.
It probably takes you guys a little longer to get out there if it weren't spread out.
Absolutely.
And like you said, there may not be a lot of other takers.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you know, I don't suppose you have the same sort of response time requirements like we have locally for our departments because you're specialized.
Right. Right.
But does it put us at a disadvantage? Are there any federal standards that we're not meeting because we're so geographically challenged and
Right.
and having to have that function
Right.
centralized?
Excellent question. And if you allow me, so the main reason we have a hazmat team is because all of you are required, you know, by statute to have an emergency response for hazardous materials emergencies. and your emergency response plan is to have a county-wide hazmat team, and when we're the ones who provide that service. It is significantly less expensive than each individual fire department having their own team. To offset that, though, all of our firefighters throughout the county are trained up to an operational level as hazardous materials first responders. So they can respond, and that's the way our plan works, is they respond on that closest fire engine in San Bruno or Half Moon Bay. They respond to the incident. They were able to identify that it's a hazardous materials issue, take some mitigating actions, isolate, deny entry, reach out to us, and then we respond over and do the actual true mitigation part of it. So they are trained at a pretty high level to kind of stabilize the situation until we can get there and actually make entry. They don't make entry at the local level unless there's lives in peril. If there's lives in peril, then they may make entry with their limited gear that they have on to take care of the situation. The expense is the main reason that we do it the way we do it, and this is something that I think the county chiefs before my time got together along with the county and came up with this model and this plan. It does work really well. We don't run a massive amount of calls. It's a very high risk but low frequency type of a situation. When we run these calls, they can be several hours. Lots of layers and many, many resources. So we'll have tons and tons of fire engines there to help us with this process, and they're big calls, typically. So the expense of training all your individual fire departments up to that level, and on top of that, you have to have a minimum number by federal statute and state statutes to make an entry. You have to have at least 5 trained at the level our team is trained at to make an entry. For every fire department to have that would be a huge expense. So it works out well. We run, it varies from year to year, anywhere from 30 to 60 calls for service a year. And if you divide that up amongst the cities, there could be cities that are running a couple of calls a year, possibly. And to have that amount of training and that amount of expense just didn't make sense. And that's kind of, I think, how it landed the way it did. It's a pretty good model. We look at our neighbors to the south, Santa Clara County, who we have a large network of hazmat responders that we train with and do a lot with. I think there's 6 teams in Santa Clara County. But a lot of the smaller cities use the bigger ones to kind of offset them. I think that's another reason we do it the way we do. We don't really have a big city to kind of handle that here in our county, but it's worked out the way it's worked out.
Really appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Other questions? Okay, it doesn't look like we have,
Oh, I was just going to make a motion to approve, but I don't know.
public comment.
Public comment? Any on Zoom? There are none.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
A motion to approve agreement with hazmat services with San Mateo Consolidated Fire, and thank you for all the work.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded without objection. You okay? Yes. All right, moving on. Item 8 is approve an agreement for chief officer with San Mateo Consolidated Fire.
I'll take that one. Chief officers kind of had history here at the Department of Emergency Management within OAS. They've been with us for about 9 years, 10 years, somewhere in that range. Tony will be the 4th one. He's from San Mateo Consolidated that we've had here. It's just another tool in our toolbox for us. A lot of times to have him here, he does a lot for us. In fact, when we were really shorthanded, he spent the time for 1 week as a coordinator doing stuff that we normally do short. But he is our contact with the fire service. He goes to fire chiefs meetings, he does all that stuff. He does all the training for Zone Haven for us, which is our evacuation tool. Does a lot with RAVE. He's introduced this thing with the sand table where they can actually map and see how a fire goes and use Zone Haven at the same time. It's an asset to us. He'll be on a 2-year contract with us. And so we look forward to keep that relationship going. I can ask you can answer or ask me specific questions if you wish, but he's a great resource to have here. Yes.
Silver.
Thank you. Do individual cities get to call and say, hey, we've got a question or a problem with X, and get some advice on that?
From us?
From Tony.
Tony would know if it's regarding fire?
You mentioned Zone Haven.
Right.
So, and if you look
Sure.
at the minutes that we're approving or approved, the concern I have for any cut-through city, but Millbrae especially, if the airport evacuates and we're evacuating at the same time, we've got tens of thousands of people, and they're gonna cut up San Bruno Avenue and Millbrae Avenue, and then we've got people from all over the Bay Area or world cutting through us, trying to figure out where to go. And Uber Lyft is blocking up Millbrae Avenue right now, so I just would love to have a conversation about Zone Haven. We haven't done a drill yet in Millbrae. We want to. We know it's COVID time, but we've got, any of us who have out-of-town cut-through traffic have this other layer on that, because they may not use Zone Haven wherever they come from, or know it. And I hate to say, I literally do stay up at night wondering how, if Uber Lyft has blocked Millbrae Avenue entirely, how we're gonna get people out of Millbrae, San Bruno, and Burlingame.
One of the things in the RFP we have for the disaster evacuation plan for the county is to look how the airport will influence an evacuation. It's similar like on 101. How are they going to block that? What's going to happen there? It's just going through, when Asiana 214 went down, we know that the traffic was a mess, right? But the reality is we want them to look at that and the influence they could have. Then that means we have to meet with the airport. We do meet with the airport regularly. And when there's a major incident at the airport, they call us immediately, usually. But we can talk about, hey, maybe it's, you lock down and hold until we can get what's going on the other side of the road going. But this is down the road a lot, and that's why we're bringing an independent person in to look at an independent company to look at these things for us.
Okay. I fully in support. I just would like us to communicate.
Sure.
I get when SFO's been on lockdown for the bomb scare a few months ago or this or that, because it does
Absolutely.
impact us. I think we should be talking more.
Okay.
And I can't speak for San Bruno, but we're the two that are going to be most impacted by that.
Yes.
Greg Taylor, Portola Valley. When you do that study, can you do also the southern border
We're doing
as
the
well?
whole county.
Because we have sort of, it's not this SFO
Right.
problem, but our problem is that we're going to get Santa Clara County potentially coming in on a narrow set of roads.
Yep.
At the same time, we're trying to evacuate on those same set
Right.
of roads. So I think any time we have a border between our jurisdiction and another one, we probably need to look at how that's going to sort
Yep,
out.
we have worked with Palo Alto, because there's some influence there, and we can definitely talk to Stanford. We worked on them, we actually talked to them about fire stuff, right, a little bit. And, in fact, we even explored using Foothill College as an area for you to go to.
Yeah, great, thank you.
We do a lot of work.
Other questions? Yes.
Just a point of clarification, I thought I heard you say a 2-year, this is a 3-year contract.
It's two. There's a typo there, sir. The good chief caught it, so. Any other questions?
On my right? No question. Turn to public comment.
Call for
Any
public comment?
No?
Any on Zoom? There are none.
There are none. Okay. Time for a motion.
Commissioner, I have a question really quick. On the PowerPoint, it has an amount of 228, 229. So is this just, we just take a year off?
Yeah.
And the number?
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
right.
right, that's what we read on, right, so
Make a motion to approve that.
Hey,
28's wrong.
we have to look at the number to make sure it's correct. That's one thing we have to do. It's correct on the contract.
And it's around the 229?
I don't have it with me.
251 and 258, yeah. 2 years.
251? Move approval.
It's been moved and seconded. Second. Without objection?
Okay.
Okay, motion passes. That brings us, I believe, to item 10,
Yes,
Director's Report.
yep. You all received that ahead of time. I'd just like to introduce a group of new employees. Sean? Sean came to us from San Mateo County EMS. He was a contractor for them during the COVID. He worked in a logistics section. He's graduated from the University of San Diego with a BA in International Security and Conflict Resolution, so he knows about the county. He's been here for a while, and he joined us a few weeks ago. He's a great addition for us. We have Rick Reed. Rick is a former Office of Emergency Services employee in the late 80s, we figured out, right? Is that it? Then he went on to the County of Santa Clara, where he was the Director of the Office of Emergency Services. Followed that, after that, he went to Intel, where he spent 25 years in different various leadership roles. Rick attended and graduated from several universities, has a PhD in psychology, with an emphasis in media. So, great addition to us. I've known Rick for a long time. Good person, a lot of experience.
I was wondering what happened to Rick Reed, 25 years at
There you
Intel.
go.
That explains it.
There he is.
Seems like only yesterday.
We've brought him back, you know. The other thing I want to update you on a little bit is SMC alert. Actually, that started on January the 1st, right during the storms, and good job in getting it all through. Thanks to Ryan Reynolds, who's been kind of the lead on that for us, trying to get the system settled down and working. Anytime you change the system, as you know, there's always problems, but we were able to handle it even during the disaster. We do a lot of work with the cities. The cities are provided that actually from the state of California. That's who pays for that, so it's at no cost to us. Please remind your citizens to sign up for SMC Alert. The more people we get on there, the better. I think we have, what, about 134,000 people. What do we, we send them, what, 197 alerts, and how many people go to? It was quite a few. It was quite a few. So, also, we are working on an initiative with San Mateo County Library System to use their 13 libraries as resources for us during a storm, or if there's a problem, or there's power outage, or anything like that. I've met with the director, and she's pretty amenable for us to talk further about this. So we could use those as a PSPS if there's a power outage or something in that nature happens. It's happened during the storm. I think Adam made the phone call, and they were willing to stay open till 11 p.m. that night, correct?
Correct.
And they got nothing from us. So we want to work closer with them, develop a relationship and a memorandum of understanding for that. I think we'll also get PG&E to give us some of those emergency kits to put in all those libraries. So the libraries that we're going to use are pretty much spread out throughout the county, and we think be a great relationship for us to work that out with them. Critical infrastructure, and this is one that's been concerning to me for a while. This is the Montera North Peak radio site. This is the one we almost lost on New Year's Eve, and we are going to actually start work on repairing just the road. We're not developing it. We're just going to fix the infrastructure so we can deliver fuel to the generators up there. So this happens again, that we're more prepared. The long-term plan for that, that's going to go to another agency or another department. We're just here to fix those problems to make sure we can get even a Type 3 or Type 6 engine to the top of the hill, which will provide more safety and security for the people in Montera and that coast side. And the final one I have is there was some discussion, and it's kind of open for here if you want to talk about it a little bit. It's up to the chair. But increasing the number of meetings from 4 to 6. Whatever you want to do, I'm not, doesn't matter to me. I would like to have a January meeting. We talked about this at the finance and the admin meeting last week. That could be your onboarding, because there's no onboarding really that we do right now. And people need to sit down and understand what we do, how we do it, the number of people we have, and also review the budget type of stuff, right, and understand our capabilities, whether it's RAVE, whether it's Zone Haven, and we can demonstrate that to people. Other than that, I do have a FEMA report. Somebody asked me about a FEMA report last time, right? So total people that were served were in applications received were 295. Applications approved, this is for FEMA, were 153 for $6,700,000 plus or minus. At the event center, 438 people went to the event center, and a total of 1,387 people from San Mateo County registered with FEMA. And there is, where's David?
Right.
What's the new, we just got something today or yesterday?
So from the storms that happened from February 21st, they've reopened the window for us to file for public assistance because of the damage that was discovered since then. So we have until Wednesday to get our information to the DEM so that we can file for trying to get FEMA assistance for public assistance from the February 21st forward storms. So that message went out to the city managers today, special districts, FEMA groups.
Any questions?
Just one, I like your idea with the libraries. For some reason, it hits me that we have a city in the county whose libraries are not part of.
They are, yeah, like, I know that City of San Mateo, I don't believe is with them, and there's one other one, I think, there's maybe two.
I remember San Mateo, but I wasn't sure.
Yeah, but I know San Mateo for sure, but the 13 other libraries that they have, we can use. I'm more than happy to approach San Mateo and see if they want to participate.
I think it'd be worthwhile, especially.
I'll give that to Tony. Where's Tony? We can maybe try to see what we can do with that.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So Millbrae owns the library, but we contract
Yeah.
with the county. So I will bring this back to our county JPA rep.
Yeah.
We had our first in-person SFO roundtable meeting, which is held in our Chakouty room, but we had storm damage, so we had to move to the library. And 2 days before the meeting, which we get people from FEMA back east, the library pulled the plug. They pulled the Ethernet plug. So I think it's not going to be quite so simple. Our EOS is going to be solar soon, and it's going to have backup battery power. So I hope that we'll continue to work with the cities, not just the libraries, because in this case, it was a temporary library leader, blah, 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 but it took up 2 days of, literally 2 days of my time to get everything back to work so that we could host a meeting. And so there is that relationship. But we own the building. So, and we haven't pulled that card, but I was ready to pull that card.
I understand. I understand the frustration.
We love the library. Everybody loves the library, but I think there's some communication things we have to work through.
No problem. This is in the talking stage right now. We've got one meeting. We're gonna meet after I do my presentation or talk to you guys folks about it. And they have a meeting on the 9th, I think it is, the JPA.
I'm not on that JPA.
Anyway, we're going to talk about it because I think it's a great idea.
Yeah, I'll be really quick. I'm thinking a lot about the IRA, infrastructure incentive money, and we talked earlier about capital projects that maybe we should think about strategically in the future. And we probably don't have an answer to this, but I would urge us to look to see if there's any monies that we can apply to. I know we already do grants, but because there's such a bucket of money in the IRA.
We try to keep our eye open for grants all the time, to be honest with you.
That's all.
Anything else?
Questions on the right?
So I'm new, and I like that idea of that January onboarding.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
great idea.
Thank you.
So let's go back to that. Don suggested the idea of changing from 4 to 6 meetings per year. Does anybody have a strong feeling about that?
It wouldn't start till 2024, by the way.
It doesn't start till 2024, just around the corner.
Yeah.
Through the chair, I think one of the reasons, being on this, I think Davina and I probably started around the same time. We have never done debriefing. There's never been enough time. So and then we went through so many years of multiple incidents at the same time. I think it's a good idea. We can always have really short meetings. And now this terrific new space, it makes it worth the driveway down here.
Okay, so any other strong feelings? Maybe we can refer to the administration.
I have a question on this topic. Do we need to have everyone here in person, or is there a possibility for some hybrid? Because I noticed that we just barely made a quorum tonight, and I'm worried that if we went from 4 to 6, we might not have a quorum at these meetings. So that would be my kind of take-back question would be, could we maybe have 2 of them be informal and therefore not have to be in person?
No, the Crown Act requirements are for in-person meetings at this point, so we're not able to do that.
But we probably could do the training component, right?
We could do, or if we had a training that was, less than a quorum.
Yeah.
For just new members.
Okay.
We could do that without it being at a meeting. But there's probably some benefit of at least having a short reorientation in January.
Once a year.
Go ahead.
Okay. I was going to suggest that perhaps if the meeting agenda doesn't contain any action items, I think you could do it without a quorum.
I think we just follow the legislation that's pending that will give us some flexibility.
Yeah.
And I want to emphasize, and I'm looking at my colleague from Half Moon Bay, like, it is a journey to get over here, and we're talking about being good to the environment and everybody jumping in their car to drive individually here. That's the only hesitation I have in increasing from 4 to 6, and I'm wondering if there's ways that we can use Zoom as far as like a workshop, where if any of us wanted to attend, we could, to get that debriefing, to have that, like a town hall sort of conversation. Just wondering if there are other options.
One thing that I'll say is that we can come back with, you know, some alternatives, and those alternatives might include, you know, report outs on other items and whatnot in a method that is not Brown Act non-compliant. So.
That sounds good. Foster City?
I was just gonna comment that even with the rules that came into play, we can still Zoom into a meeting. You know, if we don't fall into the specific categories you're talking about emergency, as long as the address is on the, just like before, you can put the address on the agenda packet and you could Zoom in. I mean, so it's still possible, even with the rules they are today.
Correct. There's a way. You have to open your door and make it publicly available and post it properly, but yeah, there is a method to there.
And you have to be ADA compliant.
Yes.
That's usually the hard one. If you have any stairs, you're kind of in trouble.
I think there's two other parts to that. You have to have a reason for not being in person. I ran a council meeting from Washington, and I posted the agenda in a public place. And I also, at a state commission, held meetings in Millbrae for Northern California, for the Bay Area. So they're doable, but it would be a lot more work for staff, because all of us who wanted to be remote would have to make sure you knew where we are on that. So there's a hoop, but I think it could very well work. And especially in the wintertime when 92 could be open, may not be opened.
Adam, can you just bring a report back?
Sure.
Yeah, we will.
Options. Okay.
That's all I have, sir.
Well, wait a second. Got one question here. Just wondering if between DEM and the county executive's communication team, you could pump out information on the FEMA extension. I guess the deadline is this coming Wednesday?
Yeah.
No, we do.
So,
this is for public assistance, so that's for the cities, counties, municipalities. And so the Department of Emergency Management has sent out information recently, but we'll continue to do that to try to make sure everybody meets the deadline. Supervisor, is it okay if I just add one thing to Director's report? Of course. Thank you. I just want to thank all the DEM staff. We're not done yet, and something could catastrophically fail, but it's gone reasonably well in my estimation. And also thank the Office of Community Affairs, Emma Gonzalez and her team that's here to help organize this meeting. We're trying to do something that's tricky in this space, and I just want to thank them for their hard work and their anxiety.
These two gentlemen are from Emma staff?
Yeah.
Yes.
Office of Community Affairs? How did you wrangle them into this?
We do a lot of work with them, actually.
Yeah, we love the Office of Community Affairs, and we're always trying to include them, and they were kind enough to help us get this organized because they do a number of roadshow type meetings like this, and they're dealing with some of the same issues.
I gotcha. Thank you.
But real quick, the thing that they do for us too is during these storms, they helped out tremendously. You know, they were part of the folks who staffed the phones at the EOC for multilingual kind of stuff. So we do a lot of work with Emma.
Very good.
Very good.
Thank you. The chair is confused. So item 9 on your agenda says approve minutes for Emergency Services Council meeting. But then item 3 says action to set agenda and approve consent agenda items. The minutes approval seem to fall under the consent. So has item 9 been taken care of?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Very good. Chair is not confused anymore.
Where would the chair like it?
Pardon?
Where would the chair like that?
I'd prefer the consent agenda up on, well, it doesn't matter, whatever you.
No, we got it.
No, it's okay. It just was a little confusing to me.
Okay, we're good.
And maybe to others, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe item 3 could say also minutes, I guess. I'm not sure. But we'll turn to item 11, which is ESC member reports, and so we'll start over here and move around this way, if that's okay. Here's, anything to say?
Nothing to report for the city of San Mateo.
Well, this has to do with flooding, but I did meet with a constituent whose entire house flooded, this year, and hadn't flooded before. She's been there 45 years in her home, hasn't flooded before since 1982, and, her house was built in the 40s, and the entire neighborhood is just completely inadequate in terms of infrastructure for flooding. So it was just really interesting seeing that on the ground and how great the storms were this year. So she did get FEMA funds.
Okay, good.
And I guess that's all. Thank you all for this, the work in January, February, March.
Is that Cordilleras Creek by chance?
No, this was right off Woodside Road. All of these streets that come, it's along Woodside Road, which is, as you know, goes downhill to the bay. And her street is perpendicular to Woodside Road, and all of these roads go into her street, which is Sierra, and none of the roads that go into her street have storm drains. No one thought of that in the 1940s or 1930s. And so it's just, she's got this huge lake that is also her house. Anyway.
Menlo Park.
I have no reports from Menlo Park, other than to say thank you for all the information. Yeah, we're working with our sewer authority. I'm on the board of the sewer authority, and we're working hard at adapting our plant to avoid further flooding issues. Our electric system was under serious threat during this last storm, so.
Do you happen to have the address for that fundraiser?
No, I do in here someplace, and I will get it for you. Let me just. San Mateo Credit Union, 350 Convention Way.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Nothing from Belmont.
Just to reiterate my thanks to staff for the organization of the meeting and for the staff for what we've got here. It's made it really nice to meet. Thank you.
From Millbrae, we have a fire assessment that has one more year, so we'll be going out to the voters. Apparently, we run the election and we count the ballots at City Hall, something entirely new to me. But we'll be doing that in the next year, and our contract with CCFD is also up for review on that. We did have one finding from the storm, which was something new. We and Burlingame share our clean water sewage outfall, but there was that much rain coming down that we could not get rid of our clean water, which means we can't get new sewage water in, which then leads to sewage overflows. Pacifica and Millbrae tend to have the highest sewage overflows. A lot of us have been sued by Baykeeper, but it's just one more thing we have to fix. I was in DC to look for money to go tertiary with our sewer water, so we'll have other piping systems and cisterns on that, so it's kind of exciting, but that is our activity on that.
Same for Portola Valley.
So it does have something to report. I'll break my silence. First of all, I appreciate the great work that's been done here in putting this together. I mentioned earlier that I served on this group about 15 years ago for about 10 years. And the level of professionalism, I'm not complaining about what it was back then, but you guys have done a great job, especially the packets and the information, so I appreciate that. I did want to mention an emergency services related issue and wanted to thank the county for their help. As a lot of you know, Woodside Road, which is one of the main highways going up the mountain, is out. Affects Portola Valley as well. There's very few streets going all the way up to Skyline. Old La Honda Road is one of them. Kings Mountain is the other one, and Woodside is obviously the main one. That road is wiped out. It is a very serious, all three of those roads are treacherous, and there are so few roads going up the mountain. I think that if you headed south, it would be Page Mill. If you headed north, it's the 92. So the residents and property owners in that area really count on it, and it's really affected emergency services as well. To get a paramedic or a fire truck up there now takes 45 minutes. I mean, you'll be dead before they show up. And it has already impacted people. So we're trying to get that road open. It's a state highway, and I think that we've had some pretty good success with our assembly member and senators. And also I wanted to thank the county especially for their efforts in trying to open up that road. I know Council Member Ned Fluitt on our side and also Mayor Chris Shaw have worked very closely with the county to try to do what they could to really ease that. It's really impacting a large number of citizens who are going miles out of their way to try to get up and down that mountain, often 3 or 4 times a day to drop their kids off at school or go shopping or pick up medicines or go to the doctor's office. So I appreciate your efforts very much in trying to help out.
35 closed now, too.
35 had a sinkhole today. Yeah.
Anything else? There being none, we will adjourn. Could I see Don and Adam for a little minute?
Sure.
Thank you, everybody, for coming.
Thank you.
I'll see you tomorrow.
I'm catching up on Daily Journal articles.
As soon as you get it.